Chad, can I ask Chad to respond to that, basically from a media perspective, given what you've just heard? Can you offer some sort of feedback from your end on how you think we can address a problem like that? From a media perspective, or at least gaining stakeholder engagement in this?
Well, I think the way we think about it in the United States in this increased level of transparency, it's really about, again, I'm not familiar with the numbers, but just sharing them is certainly a start. There's so much that we're working with right now through social media and technology that consumers and other stakeholders are using to keep track of companies and governments and to understand what these numbers might mean. And I'll give an example. At Nike, in the 1990s, there was a big issue with what was happening in some of the factories. And into the 2000s, what happened was Nike began a more open process of really engaging stakeholders so that, for example, in a corporate responsibility report, worked with some of the company's biggest critics to engage them on what they thought the report said and what it didn't say, and included comments unedited in the report itself. And to this day, has earned a lot of credit just by being transparent. Not every factory has improved the way some think they should. But this move to transparency, quite frankly, takes a lot of the conversation away from the destination, and really it's the journey and how you get there, and just facilitating a more open relationship has really helped.
Thank you. Dr. Leah, can you potentially recommend a few sort of more strategic approaches to the kind of problems that were just mentioned, and how can we as an Arab community grow in a sustainable manner based on sort of some of the things you've been hearing in the past few discussions?
I mean, that comes all back to how to achieve what you mentioned earlier, how to achieve sustainable development, basically development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. And I think it's very important to see how well we balance the social, economical, and environmental objective when we are making decisions today. In coming back to economic growth and basically growth also in the region, one should not equal economic growth equals the quality of life, and we need to see that a growth path needs to also integrate externalities, what we have also heard earlier on. For example, maybe health impacts, maybe climate change, or maybe biodiversity loss. So you have to look at various angles and not look at the very traditional way of economic growth.
Okay, thank you. Tariq, you've heard both sides of the story. There's a communications aspect, there's a strategy aspect. From someone who led a startup into a global leader, can you offer some insight as to how you think we can collectively move forward?
Yeah, I think there's three thoughts that I'd like to share. First, as a statistic, globally or annually we produce about 50,000 megatons of carbon. 5% of that is produced by the logistics and transport industry. But surprisingly, I think close to 50% comes from livestock production, which is, just knowing that is important, because I think the key thing is to somehow be able to impact what the consumer is doing. And the consumer is consuming, obviously, a lot of meat. That picture is going to be getting increasingly troublesome for the global economy as we go forward. But it's also something that's a personal choice that I think people can start to think about, and maybe when it hits their pocket and as we go forward, these changes can start really impacting things. 2, consumers are confused by sustainability. There's no really clear labeling standards. It's very difficult for them to make decisions about products based on what they read or see. So it's not easy to get consumers to focus and channel their purchasing power into areas that will enhance the environment, because there's still a lot of discourse as to what actually what we're actually doing to the environment. I think the good part is that at least with our global accounts, 50% of our customers are starting to ask, our consumers are starting to ask about benchmarking carbon and other sort of environmental issues in their supply chain. So I think that's a very positive decision, but we're not seeing that global accounts are actually making decisions about the way they consume logistics based on those metrics yet. They're focused more on price and efficiency. Hopefully, as we get down the road, they'll start making decisions about the way they consume logistics based on some of these other issues. The second major, I think, issue is a cultural one. I think in Europe and the developed economies, there's a real big emphasis on carbon. And I would ask, if you were to go around and ask companies here in the Middle East, by and large, it's not as big of an issue for the Middle Eastern consumer as it is for the Western consumer. But you take the flip side of that. We live in a country where we have a shortage of water, where water is subsidized. It's not being sold at its proper economic cost to the consumer, but yet the vast majority of the water that we consume is literally being flushed down the toilet and not being used again. And you go to a city like London, and I think I read a statistics that the average glass of water had been consumed 8 times. So it's kind of interesting to think of that. Here we are in a country where water is at a short supply, and we're not really optimizing our resources. And then I might add, then it's not a big deal when we actually dump sewage in the sea. So I think culturally, we really have to look at how different countries and different regions are looking at these issues. I think finally that as a practical sort of guide, I think there's an excellent study that was financed by the logistics and transportation industry at the World Economic Forum. It's called Decarbonizing the Supply Chain. And there's some very interesting things, practical steps one can do to actually look at how you sort of impact carbon. I don't want to go through all of them, but there's a couple basic ones that people should keep in mind. Clearly, adopting clean vehicles and sort of more efficient vehicles has a major impact. But also things like de-speeding the supply chain. One of the byproducts of the economic crisis was that a lot of companies had ordered inventory that they didn't actually want. So it wasn't a very difficult sale for the shipping lines like Maersk to go back and say, listen, we're going to slow our ships down and bring those goods to you a little bit later. And the companies were quite happy because their warehouses were full. But the byproduct of that was that they saved about 50% of the cost on their actual fuel costs. So actually slowing down the supply chain, looking at how you can substitute sea freight for, all of us, are guilty of, shopping and clicking and getting something delivered by courier. So, these are things that really can make a difference. Also, switching production to, in this country we buy tomatoes and vegetables that are grown in Holland, and it makes no sense to me why you would buy fruits and vegetables that don't taste that good in the first place because they come from a hothouse. But we could just as easily have those same things here. What do you need? You need water that's actually recycled if it's hydroponics. And you have energy that we have ample sources of energy. And you need good sunlight. So these are things that we can do practically today that will make a big difference and is picked up by the study. So I encourage you all to just download it and read it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ann, can you build on what we've heard today? There's obviously a large communication issue in Kuwait. A management system is being recommended, but it's not necessarily communicated or being implemented to the level that you want, as well as involving the corporate sector. Could you sort of build on Tariq's last points? How can we really find a solution that addresses, the concerns for everyone from the regular person all the way up to the largest corporation?
Yeah, no, it's been a terrific discussion, and I was very intrigued by this issue of an environmental management system. It almost is a hybrid between an incentive package and a regulation. Done well, an environmental management system is going to give companies the flexibility to efficiently and effectively achieve a goal, and yet you want to have some enforcement behind that just to make sure that folks take it seriously. I think it's a very intriguing concept. I think one of the things to take away maybe from today is that everybody has a role. There's a role for government in the signals that they send to us, the technology development that they encourage, the practices that they insist upon, the purchasing that they make as entities in terms of signals to the marketplace. We as companies have an opportunity to really use innovation and technology to deliver against some of these big challenges. There are no shortage of challenges. We've heard about them today. Every country has them. There's a role for NGOs and universities in this education and awareness to help people understand, to help them get motivated to change. Sometimes the early technology research or expertise. We just started a partnership with and collaboration with the Nature Conservancy because we found out, frankly, we didn't really have the expertise, and we certainly didn't have it in a way that we could systematically take ecosystem services into our decision-making in a thoughtful way. And then we as citizens all have obligations and opportunities. All of our individual actions actually make a difference, and collectively they make an enormous difference. But sometimes I don't think we necessarily think about it, or we don't take it as seriously as maybe we might. So one of the things I hope people walk away from today, and what I've certainly seen in our own company, is sometimes we look at these things and we see them as a threat, because fundamentally we have to change. But really what they are is an opportunity. They're an opportunity to go solve some of the big problems. They're an opportunity to use our creativity and an opportunity to make a difference. And hopefully that is encouraging to folks.
Thank you.